Have you ever walked away from someone feeling as if the marrow of your soul had been siphoned out, drop by invisible drop, like you were disappearing, one compromise at a time? Maybe it was in the hushed arguments that never quite made sense, the shifting stories, the way their eyes glazed over when you spoke of your dreams. You start to wonder, why me? Why do narcissists always seem to find their way to your doorstep, slipping past your instincts, leaving you doubting your sanity? This isn't an accident, and it isn't random. There is a hidden architecture behind why narcissists target you specifically, a design rooted in your deepest psychological patterns, invisible wounds, and the ancient shadows that Carl Jung warned us about. In the language of psychology, it's called narcissistic abuse, but in your life, it feels like a quiet war against your spirit. Today, we're going to tear back the curtain on this dark psychology. You'll learn why narcissists are magnetized to what's tender, precious, and unguarded in you. You'll meet Sophia, a woman who gave everything to someone who hollowed her out, and Daniel, whose quiet empathy became the perfect hunting ground for a predator's ego. By the end of this journey, you'll understand not only how narcissistic personality disorder distorts love into control, but why your empathy, your hope, and your belief in redemption have made you a target. You'll see why toxic relationships feel inescapable, and how you can finally break free from the cycle. This isn't just psychology. This is survival, and it starts now. Sophia was the kind of woman who carried other people's burdens as if they were her own. When her friends wept, she listened for hours. When strangers poured out their tragedies, she absorbed every word. She believed that if you just loved someone enough, you could mend the cracks in their soul. But when she met Elena, a woman who seemed exquisitely broken, her empathy became something far more dangerous, an invitation. Carl Jung once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." But Sophia never dared to look into her own darkness. She only gazed into Elena's, trying to heal it, understand it, fix it. What she didn't see was how her compassion was the golden mirror Elena needed to polish her fragile self-image. Psychology tells us that narcissists have an uncanny instinct for finding those who radiate warmth and acceptance. Recent studies in mental health reveal that individuals high in empathy are often the preferred targets of narcissistic personality disorder. Because when you are wired to care, you become less likely to question, less likely to leave. This is why narcissists target empathetic people. They look for hearts so soft, they can be molded into whatever shape the narcissist requires. At first, the attention feels intoxicating. Elena showered Sophia with praise. "You see me like no one ever has. You make me feel safe." But slowly, that praise became a currency, and Sophia was expected to keep paying day after day just to maintain the illusion of closeness. In toxic relationships, this is how the cycle begins. Your empathy becomes a weapon turned against you. Your kindness becomes a tool of emotional abuse. And when you finally start to question the endless demands, you are told you are selfish, ungrateful, or cold. It's a classic tactic called gaslighting, designed to confuse your sense of reality until you no longer trust your own perceptions. Jung would have called this the possession by the shadow, when another person's unresolved darkness infiltrates your psyche and blurs the line between who you are and who they need you to be. Sophia felt this erosion every time Elena accused her of betrayal for needing space, or of cruelty for wanting a moment alone. But there is a way out of this psychological snare. Healing from narcissists starts with radical self-inventory. Ask yourself, why do I feel responsible for someone else's happiness? Why do I believe that love means sacrifice without limits? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also the beginning of freedom. If you find yourself constantly rescuing others, it may be time to rescue yourself. Mental health professionals recommend establishing non-negotiable boundaries. Learn to say no without guilt. Practice stepping back when your instincts warn you something isn't right. Because the truth is, empathy without boundaries is not love. It's self-abandonment. Sophia's story is not unique. Narcissists thrive on your brightest qualities, your compassion, your hope, your devotion. This is why narcissists target what's important to you. Your empathy becomes their refuge, their fuel, their playground. But you are allowed to protect your light. You are allowed to keep the golden mirror for yourself. Daniel grew up in a house where love was conditional. If he got good grades, his father would smile. If he cried, he was mocked. Over time, he learned to shrink himself, to apologize for existing, to anticipate other people's moods before they erupted. As an adult, this habit was so ingrained, he mistook it for kindness. When he met Elena, she seemed to worship his sensitivity. She called him the only man who understands me. In her approval, he felt seen for the first time. But this was never about love. It was about supply. Carl Jung once warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For Daniel, that fate was repeating the same toxic relationships again and again, each time with a different face, but the same silent contract. He would sacrifice himself, and in return, he would finally be loved. This is why narcissists target you specifically, because they sense your unresolved trauma, like wolves smell blood. Psychology research shows that individuals who have survived childhood emotional abuse are statistically more vulnerable to narcissistic abuse as adults. The familiar feeling of walking on eggshells feels almost comforting. You know the script by heart. You just don't realize you're living in a nightmare you didn't create. Elena learned exactly how to exploit Daniel's past. When he tried to set boundaries, she weaponized his fear of abandonment. "I guess you're just like everyone else. You can't handle my feelings." When he hesitated to meet her endless demands, she called him selfish, accusing him of emotional abuse. This is the dark psychology of projection, what Jung called the shadow. In her eyes, he was never quite good enough. And over time, Daniel came to believe it. His mental health deteriorated. He stopped seeing friends. He doubted his worth. Every day he woke up wondering how someone who once adored him could now treat him like an inconvenience. But beneath this chaos was a hidden truth. Elena wasn't responding to Daniel as he was. She was responding to the parts of herself she refused to face. Her shame, her rage, her fear of insignificance. In the narcissistic personality disorder dynamic, the target becomes the scapegoat onto which the narcissist offloads all that is intolerable. If this feels painfully familiar, you are not alone, and you are not to blame. But to stop attracting predators, you must stop confusing familiarity with safety. The ache to be chosen is not proof that someone deserves you. Healing from narcissists begins with self-compassion. Mental health professionals recommend trauma-informed therapy to identify the unconscious beliefs driving your patterns. I am only lovable if I prove my worth. I must be perfect to be safe. When you bring these beliefs into the light, they lose their power. Daniel eventually began to see that the need to fix Elena was a mirror of his childhood, an endless attempt to earn the love he was denied. The day he stopped explaining himself was the day he started to heal. This is why narcissists target empathetic people with hidden wounds, because they know you will try to rescue them. But you are not here to be a wound collector. You are here to become whole. Sophia never saw it coming. Elena was magnetic, funny, brilliant, self-deprecating. She told stories about her traumatic childhood, her battles with depression, the countless people who had failed her. Sophia felt an ache to protect her, to be the one who finally stayed. But what Sophia didn't understand was that she wasn't falling for Elena. She was falling for Elena's false self, a carefully constructed persona designed to camouflage her emptiness. Carl Jung described this mask with unsettling precision. Persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. This is the heart of the narcissist's strategy, to create a character so convincing, so pitiable, so admirable, that you never think to question what lies beneath. Psychology research into narcissistic personality disorder shows that this false self is not merely a facade, it's a survival mechanism. Because without constant validation, the narcissist's sense of self collapses. This is why narcissists target you specifically. Your admiration becomes a life raft they cannot afford to lose. In the beginning, Elena mirrored Sophia's every preference. She professed to love the same music, the same books, the same causes. She called it fate, soul connection, the universe bringing us together. In reality, it was a calculated seduction, a psychological hook designed to bypass Sophia's defenses. This tactic is called love bombing, and it's one of the most common forms of emotional abuse in toxic relationships. The intensity can feel euphoric, but that is precisely the danger. Because when someone accelerates intimacy before trust has time to grow, what they're really doing is positioning you to depend on them. As months passed, the mask began to slip. Sophia noticed Elena's small cruelties, her jealousy when Sophia spent time with friends, her condescending remarks disguised as concern. But every time Sophia tried to pull away, Elena transformed back into the vulnerable narcissist, tearfully confessing how afraid she was of abandonment. This cycle of idealization and devaluation is the narcissist's dark art. When you are in their orbit, you are either everything or nothing. The whiplash erodes your sense of reality until you can no longer tell which version is true. Jung would have said that Elena was possessed by her shadow. Her terror of being unimportant was so vast, she built a fortress of illusions. But Sophia's empathy became the mortar holding it all together. To escape this web, you must practice reality testing. Mental health experts recommend keeping a journal of behaviors rather than promises. If someone's words and actions don't align, trust the evidence of your senses over the intoxication of your hope. Ask yourself, who am I without this person's approval? What parts of me have I silenced to keep their love? These questions are a bridge back to your own authenticity. Sophia eventually understood that she was not in love with Elena as she truly was. She was in love with the mask. And no amount of devotion can heal someone who refuses to meet you in reality. This is why narcissists target empathetic people, because you are the perfect audience for their performance. But you deserve relationships built on truth, not theater. You deserve to be seen, not manipulated. Daniel didn't notice it at first. The erosion was slow, almost imperceptible. A missed dinner with friends here, a canceled weekend with his brother there. At first, he told himself it was normal. Elena just needed more of his time. But eventually, he looked around and realized his world had shrunk to the size of her approval. Carl Jung warned us that everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. For the narcissist, this shadow is an abyss they will do anything to avoid. Instead of facing it, they project it onto you. You become the repository of their shame, their rage, their terror of insignificance. This is why narcissists target what's important to you. They know that if they can isolate you from your sources of meaning, your passions, your community, your sense of self, you will become easier to control. The more Daniel lost touch with his identity, the more he relied on Elena to define it for him. Psychology calls this dynamic projective identification. It's a form of psychological warfare where the narcissist implants their shadow into you and then attacks you for carrying it. When Elena accused Daniel of being selfish or unloving, she was describing her own hidden traits. But Daniel, starved of perspective, began to believe her version of reality. Over time, this erosion of self is what makes narcissistic abuse so devastating. You don't just lose the relationship, you lose yourself, your dreams, your voice, your light. All of it is slowly consumed by the narcissist's endless hunger. Mental health experts who study toxic relationships often use the metaphor of a parasite. The narcissist cannot generate their own sense of worth, so they must extract it from you. Your empathy, your achievements, your vitality become their supply. And when you are emptied out, they either discard you or move on to someone new. Daniel once loved painting. It was his sanctuary. a place where he felt most alive. But after months with Elena, he hadn't touched a brush. Every time he tried to reconnect with his passion, she accused him of neglecting her. He began to feel that pursuing his own joy was an act of betrayal. This is why narcissists target empathetic people, because you are more likely to sacrifice your needs to keep the peace. You are more likely to internalize blame, to believe that if you just try harder, love harder, give more, you can mend the fracture. But you can't heal someone who is committed to consuming you. Healing from narcissists requires reclaiming the parts of yourself you were taught to abandon. Mental health professionals recommend creating a ritual of reconnection. Make a list of everything that nourished you before the relationship, your friendships, your creativity, your rituals of self-care. Then, step by step, reintroduce them into your life. Daniel eventually realized that the emptiness he felt wasn't proof he was unworthy. It was evidence that he had been devoured by someone else's shadow. The moment he chose to walk away was the moment he began to remember who he was. This is why narcissists target you specifically. Because you are luminous, because you are alive, because your spirit is something they cannot generate within themselves. But no matter how much of you they consume, they can never own your soul. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of coffee she'd forgotten hours ago. She replayed the conversation in her head. Elena's calm, dispassionate voice insisting, "That never happened. You're imagining things." At first, Sophia argued. She brought up dates, details, memories. But over time, her certainty began to dissolve. Maybe she really was too sensitive. Maybe she really did misremember. Carl Jung once observed, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." Gaslighting is the narcissist's ultimate strategy for avoiding themselves. By distorting your perception of reality, they protect their own fragile ego and make you question your sanity in the process. This is why narcissists target empathetic people, because you are the most likely to doubt yourself before you doubt them. You are predisposed to see their humanity, to rationalize their cruelty, to search for the hidden wound behind their behavior. But in toxic relationships, this instinct becomes your undoing. Psychology defines gaslighting as a form of psychological manipulation that seeds confusion until the victim can no longer trust their own mind. It is not always overt. Sometimes, it's the subtle rewriting of shared history. "I never said that." "You're overreacting." "Can't you take a joke?" Other times, it's the weaponization of your vulnerabilities. "You know you have a hard time remembering things." Sophia began to keep a journal, documenting conversations word for word. At first, she felt ashamed, as if she were betraying Elena's trust. But as the weeks passed, she discovered a pattern. The events she was told never happened were all there, in black and white. The gaslighting wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious tools in narcissistic abuse because it doesn't just distort reality, it isolates you. When Sophia tried to confide in friends, Elena accused her of gossiping. When she sought therapy, Elena told her she was overcomplicating things. Slowly, the walls closed in until Sophia's only source of validation was Elena herself. This is why narcissists target what's important to you: your sense of truth, your connection to others, your confidence in your own judgment. If they can sever you from these lifelines, you will have no one left to contradict their narrative. Mental health professionals recommend several strategies to combat gaslighting. The first is maintaining an external anchor, whether it's a journal, a trusted therapist, or a friend who can remind you of reality when you start to doubt yourself. The second is practicing what psychologists call radical acceptance, acknowledging that the narcissist will never validate your experience because doing so would require them to confront their own shadow. Sophia's turning point came the night she realized she didn't need Elena's permission to trust herself. She didn't need Elena's agreement to believe her own memory. In that moment, she felt the first flicker of freedom. If you recognize this pattern in your own life, know this: you are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are experiencing psychological warfare designed to dismantle your identity. This is why narcissists target you specifically. Because when you no longer trust yourself, you become infinitely easier to control. But the truth is, your perception is valid. Your intuition is wise. And no amount of distortion can erase what you know in your bones. Daniel could never quite satisfy Elena. No matter how many compliments he offered, how many sacrifices he made, how many times he soothed her insecurities, she always seemed ravenous for more. If he praised her beauty, she wanted praise for her brilliance. If he acknowledged her suffering, she demanded recognition for her resilience. Nothing was ever enough. Psychology calls this hunger narcissistic supply, a ceaseless craving for attention, admiration, and validation. Carl Jung believed that when the ego grows too large, it becomes parasitic. The larger the ego, he wrote, the smaller the soul. A narcissist's identity is built on this imbalance, an inflated persona floating atop a hollow core. This is why narcissists target empathetic people. Your natural inclination to nurture and reassure makes you the perfect source of supply. They are drawn to your compassion like moths to a flame, compelled to bask in the warmth of your attention, even if they must destroy you to keep it. In the beginning, this dynamic can feel intoxicating. Elena often said things like, "No one has ever understood me like you." Daniel felt special, chosen. But this was never love. It was consumption. Every tender word, every thoughtful gesture, every moment of care was absorbed into Elena's void, leaving Daniel drained. Mental health research into personality disorders has found that individuals with narcissistic personality disorder experience profound feelings of emptiness when they are not being validated. This emptiness is so intolerable that they will do almost anything to avoid it: lie, manipulate, degrade, or seduce. It's not about connection. It's about survival. This is why narcissists target what's important to you: your time, your energy, your sense of purpose. If they can monopolize these precious resources, you will have nothing left to invest in yourself or anyone else. Elena frequently interrupted Daniel's work with crises that only he could solve. If he tried to set boundaries, she accused him of abandoning her. When he attempted to reconnect with old friends, she called him disloyal. Over time, this dynamic left Daniel profoundly isolated. His mental health suffered. He began to wake each morning with a numb, hollow dread. It wasn't simply that he had lost himself. He had been systematically emptied to feed someone else's ego. But this cycle can be broken. Healing from narcissists requires reclaiming your attention as your own. Mental health professionals recommend practicing the gray rock method, becoming emotionally neutral, offering no reaction to provocations. Because when you stop feeding the narcissist's hunger, they lose interest. Daniel's liberation began when he stopped explaining himself. He learned to detach from the performance, to see Elena's demands as reflections of her unhealed wounds rather than evidence of his failures. And in that detachment, he rediscovered something precious, his own worth. If you feel like you are never enough, remember, it's not because you are inadequate. It's because you are trying to fill a void that is not yours to fill. Narcissistic abuse thrives when you believe their insatiable appetite is your responsibility. This is why narcissists target you specifically, because your empathy, your energy, your belief in love, they are sustenance to someone who cannot nourish themselves. But you are not here to be consumed. You are here to live, too. If you've seen yourself in these stories, if you felt the slow unraveling of your identity, the quiet terror of losing your grip on reality, know this: you are not alone. You are not weak. You are not to blame for the darkness someone else carried into your life. Carl Jung taught that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Today, you've taken that first, courageous step. You've looked unflinchingly at the hidden architecture of narcissistic abuse. You've learned why narcissists target you specifically, why your empathy, your hope, your luminous belief in the goodness of others became a beacon they could not resist. But awareness is only the beginning. Healing from narcissists means reclaiming your story. It means refusing to let your worth be defined by the hunger of those who could never love you without consuming you. It means standing in your own light, no longer apologizing for your truth. Perhaps you are wondering how you will ever trust again, how you will ever open your heart without fear. And the answer is this: by making peace with your own shadow, by understanding that your vulnerability is not a flaw. It is a testament to your humanity. It is what makes you real. If you take only one thing from this exploration, let it be this: you have always been enough. Even when someone convinced you that your value was measured by how much you could endure. Even when your mental health was shattered by endless gaslighting and emotional abuse. Even when your spirit was nearly extinguished in the darkness of toxic relationships. You are enough, and you are worthy of a love that does not require you to sacrifice yourself to feel seen. If this video has stirred something inside you, if it has given you language for your pain, or hope that you can break free, subscribe to this channel. Together, we'll keep shining light into the places where your power was stolen. Together, we will explore the deepest corners of psychology, mental health, and the healing of the human spirit. This is your invitation to begin again, to choose yourself, to become at last the author of your own story. And no matter how many times you have been targeted, diminished, or devoured, know this: the part of you that remained unbroken is the part that will set you free.